today is all about, and yesterday, so you may have popped in and seen us in person, is about giving back to you as a community and to share some thinking and so on. And today we're talking about building personal resilience. Can somebody just type in the chat so I know someone's there, that you can actually see the PowerPoint going forward? So if someone's here that feels that, yay, fantastic, we're off. Good to see you. Ed Shackfield, Senior Principal Consultant for LHH. My background, for those that didn't meet me on the previous one, is I was in financial services, leaving university. I did that for 4 years before running away to sea, and I joined the Royal Navy, and I was an officer in the Royal Navy 14 years as a weather forecaster. Don't ever ask me for a forecast, though. At the back end of that career, I got into leadership development. I was always interested in training and development anyway, and I worked at the Leadership Academy down here in Dartmouth for several years before joining a global consultancy, and I'm delighted now to be working for LHH. I've been here for a couple of years now, so that's very much me. And my interest in the subject of resilience, I think back quite a few years back now, when 6 or 7 years ago, and I was asked to lead a conference in Pune on resilience, and the project manager said, "Oh, we'll put your name down to do two conferences. There'll only be about 500 people at each one, so nothing to worry about." I said, "I've got about 15 minutes on resilience at the moment," and that sparked my interest. I thought, well, I better brush up then. I'm talking to that number of people, and I really delved into it. It's a fantastic subject, and no more pertinent. And if I talk to many of my clients and all the facilitation I've been doing over the past year and a bit, resilience tends to be one of the subjects that comes up in the conversations about how we provide some personal development around this and get people thinking about looking after themselves, keeping themselves well. But is it just about being well? Well, we'll talk about that. And I was lucky enough to do some work with the Team GB resilience coach, a lady called Jo Hopkins, when we rewrote a program for a major bank to help them with their resilience for their leaders there. So it's a great subject. It's a good one for a Thursday. What are we going to be doing today? A little bit of a plan here, understanding what our operating environment is and the need for resilience. Let's look at a definition and explore a model that really, that's an LHH model, but it really does draw on other models there. Good practice behaviours around that model, we'll hear from you. And then some supplementary deeper dive, I guess, around a good resilient view of the world through mindset. And some final thoughts and wrap up, and that will take us very, very easily to the up to 3 o'clock. But what I thought we would do is well-being. When I started looking into this, I didn't realise actually that well-being is something that governments, and it might be surprising, I don't know, is something that is measured actively, certainly in the UK and in many other nations as well, about how is that population feeling. So we're going to do a little poll around these questions here. So you're going to be given a poll in a minute. 1 is not at all, and 10 is completely. If you want to join in, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. You prefer to just sort of sit and listen, that's great. But just indulge me. So this is drawn from the Office of National Statistics. It's called the Big Four. Some of you probably come across it. Some of you maybe have never heard of it, Ed. So there's 4 elements that the government measure around wellness and being satisfied. So first of all, it's life satisfaction. Overall, how satisfied are you with your life nowadays? 1 to 10. 1, not at all. 10, absolutely, bring it on. Worthwhile, to what extent do you feel that your life is worthwhile? If you think about Wednesday, how happy did you feel then? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 feeling very relaxed, bizarrely reversed, don't ask me why. 10 completely anxious. I suppose this is going up that way, isn't it? 10 completely anxious. How anxious did you feel today? We've got three coming up on this one. That's fine. Let's see what's coming in on those. I'm just going to, I'm keeping an eye on 73 have voted. I'm going to, just for purposes of time, just give it a couple more couple more moments, and then we'll just end the poll and just see where it is. There's quite a range here, actually. Quite a range. Certainly up at the what I would expect, the sort of 7 or 8 there. But I was, as I say, I was quite surprised when I first came across this big four. And obviously, clearly, those 3 there really do tie into sort of an anxiety question there. Okay, let's just share the results there and see what we've got. So first one there. Question 1, satisfied. Highest here is looking at 7. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. 7 is the sort of the most. 23 out of the 80 went for that, and then 7 and 8, which is good to hear. So some down at 1 there, not great. To attend to your life is worthwhile. Oh dear, yet again. But that's interesting. 7 again, 7 to 8, like worthwhile. Pretty optimistic there. Nice to see. And how Wednesday depends what happens on Wednesday, doesn't it? Middle of the week, never a good question to ask, I think. Gavin, can you not hear? Can I just have a thumbs up? People can. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. I'm hoping you can hear now. Thank you. I was concerned then. I've been talking to myself, been on mute since I started. Thank you. Oh, raining in. There we go. Yes, 7. So I'm going to stop sharing that. So basically 7's on that. Let's have a look at what I'll show you here is some of the results that you can draw off the internet actually. There you go. So what I've got here is first of all, men first, where it's a little bit different. To be honest, you're pretty much showing the same there. Life satisfaction 7 for men, 7.2 for women. Worthwhile was 7.3 for both. Happiness was 7, and anxiety level, we didn't measure that one today, was showing at still relatively low. So at 3.9 and 4.4. What is interesting to see around the resilience conversation is these graphs, which again you can get up. I've become a complete statistician. Now this is just very high. So satisfaction, worthwhile, happiness. Look at, you can see where COVID comes in, can't you? The collapse there. Some interesting stuff. So they're all just, satisfaction very high, worthwhile very high, happiness, and anxiety is as low, and seeing the percentages there, and you can see where COVID has come in there quite neatly. What is point, Ed? I hear you say the point is really that this resilience and well-being is something that is on the agenda, and it's also the agenda at sort of governmental level about how do people feel about that. Because we live in an operating environment that's unusual. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to what is he, a friend of mine? I don't know, but the tardigrades, the water bears, about 0.5 millimeter long. They're seen as one of the most resilient creatures on the planet, and they can withstand any operating environment. You can boil them, you can freeze them, you can put them underwater to the deepest oceans, or survive radiation. 10 days in low Earth orbit. They reckon that they like moist conditions. This is the sort of riverbeds and mosses and things like that. Incredibly resilient. Again, the point made here is they are born incredibly resilient to navigate any operating environment. You put them in there, they love it. They can just keep going. Now, we're not born necessarily as resilient as that, but we do all have the skills to help us with the operating environment we're in. We've just got to remember what they are, and we've got to nurture them, and we've got to build them so that we can navigate that. And that's really the purpose of the chat. Resilience is a huge subject here, so I'm conscious we're only going to sort of dance around that subject today, but hopefully we'll give you some stuff for you to think about. Okay, that's their operating environment, which is bring it on any way you like. I'm good. Our operating environment. Many of you, as HR professionals will have possibly heard of the word VUCA environment, that was born very much, well, it came sort of late 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and was a term that was initially adopted by the military, US military, first of all, but then actually, as it went on, it started to be adopted actually by the commercial world as well. The military sort of said, well, look, we're operating in an environment now where we're completely out of our depth. Things are just changing in all sorts of ways. It was called the VUCA environment. It's volatile. Change is happening routinely, and I'll dive into this a bit more. We've got an inability to predict the rate of change. It's really, really complicated, and there's a lot of potential for getting these things wrong. And if you still look back then at the early 90s, is because of the fall of the Berlin Wall, the old certainties, we call them in inverted commas, I suppose, had gone. We don't know what the enemy is. We don't know where the enemy is coming from. We don't know how to counter that threat. How do we know if you've even won? How do you know when that conflict is over? So there's all sorts of things coming out, and the commercial world will say, well, you can't just have this yourself, because we work in this as well. And so this is the operating environment that we really, really do find ourselves in. The nature, speed, and volume of change is not happening at a predictable pattern. Financial turbulence, digitization, connectivity, cost of energy, global competition, business model innovation is increasing the volatility there. So we've got all that going on. This is our operating environment. It's a frenetic pace of unpredictability. We can't really predict sometimes what's going to happen. And things, when we talk about mental models, oh, well, that happened before, so if you apply it this time, surely that will work. And the military found that to their cost and detriment as well. Oh, well, this is what happens when you do this. Oh, that hasn't worked. So we make a decision and we get a different outcome. And so it's really, really complex. So it's really difficult to make a decision, and we don't know quite what's going to happen. It's going to be confusing. There's lots of causes, lots of mitigating factors. And the problem is, of course, it's a very ambiguous situation that people are in. No precedents sometimes exist, and there's misinterpretations. And there's an inability to accurately conceptualize. And I think this is the thing that really stuck out for me, threats and before they become absolutely lethal. I think back several years, we were sitting and we were having a business strategy meeting. And we were doing our sort of SWOT analysis, as you do, your sort of strengths, weaknesses. What's the strengths of the business? What are the weaknesses of the office? Right, what could be a threat? And somebody about went, oh, I've got one. What is it? Said, oh, and this was January 2019. Said, what about if we had a pandemic? And everyone looked at each other and went, nah, well, that's not going to happen. So let's not bother talking about that, how wrong we were, and how lethal that threat became to a lot of businesses as COVID-19 swept in, just as an illustration of the point. We've got to be change ready. What is the point of all this is actually people who are personally resilient are ready. And whether they're enthusiastic and optimistic, they are to a degree realistically optimistic, which we'll talk about. Not quitting, not drowning, and not resisting to change. And this is some of my about personal resilience. It's never more needed than the multiple changes that are going on at the moment in the business world and in the larger world. We have all seen this curve before. That anyone's done change curves and personal resilience. That it's sometimes called beneficial stress or detracting stress. I prefer sometimes saying eustress or distress. Eustress is good stress. We're alive, we're in the flow, we're stimulated on the left-hand side, and it's all going really, really well. To a more distracted element here, or distress, where it starts to tip over. Those that are resilient tend to operate clearly in that sort of left-hand field there, where they're actually quite stimulated by the stuff that's going on, and they're handling a degree of stress. So it directly links to performance, a good degree of personal resilience. And I come back to the commercial sort of conversations that we have. We deal with many, many, many organizations say, can we talk about personal resilience and making sure that people are fortifying themselves, preparing themselves, and building it when they need it. Well, I've said quite a lot there. If you were to reflect now on what is resilience, what we're talking about here. If you think about somebody that you admire, and it could be somebody you've seen in the news. It can be somebody in your family. It can be a loved one. It can be a mate of yours. What characteristics do you think they demonstrated? Because this is getting into it. This is getting into the model, isn't it? Really, of What is resilience all about? What sort of things do you see? If you want to fire some things into the chat, I'll read them out as they come in. What are we talking about here? We talk about an individual that is resilient, a resilient individual. Please feel free to share your thinking on the chat. Yeah, and that's brilliant. Bounce back ability always comes up, that one. The challenges, perseverance. Yeah, acceptance. I like that, Andy. Andy Baker, that's brilliant. About accepting sort of, okay, I can't deal with that. Stoic mindset, determination, persistence. The acceptance one I come back to is about, you always see that learn to forgive and forget. Resilience individuals go, you know what, I've moved on. Motivated, sense of humor, Alicia, that is really, I think that's really, really important as well, isn't it? An ability to remain positive, and we'll come back to that point, Ruth. Thank you. Jessica, yeah, confidence, able to manage emotions in a hard and stress situations. So yeah, there's emotional intelligence coming in here, Hannah, as well, isn't there? Absolutely. And consistent. Alberta, that is a fantastic one. Consistent, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. That where you got it. You're good. There's some fantastic things in here. I'm just scanning it at the moment. Ability to overcome acceptance, perseverance, bounce back ability comes in a lot. Coping with lots of challenges. It's about coping, isn't it? Also new messages coming in. Ability to challenge and understand other opinions without being affected. Danielle, spot on as well. Controller was Olivia. So resilient individuals are not threatened by other people's opinions. They are respecting other people's points of view. And again, you must have seen some of my slides because that's absolutely on there as well. So I think that is really on the money there. Now, what can't be changed, and being okay with that, Lindsay. I think that's it. You go, because these are burdens that we carry. These are absolutely burdens that we carry, where we can just sort of, is that saying that just let go. Okay. Oh, sorry. I was just thinking back to Fight Club. Anyone who's seen that, there's a scene in there with saying just let go. But anyway, bounce back ability, flexible and adaptable, recovery from difficulties, maintaining a degree of a positive mindset, having coping. There, thank you. Having coping strategies as well. We're going, you know, I can see this is going off for me here. Reaching out for ability to challenge everything. So one of the things that comes across in all the research I've done over the years is actually those are the people that are resilient. They always see that they've got to get outside their comfort zone to build that, but you've got to keep pushing out, I guess, against this, so that you're reaching out for new challenges, because then you build more resilience in yourself, because you've exposed yourself, I guess, to that. You've sensitized yourself to different challenges. You go, I've shown I can do that. That went wrong. Make some adjustments there, and I can move forward. Kept going despite the problems. There's a bit about, you know, resilient individuals will go, you know, that sounds pretty edgy. I think I'll volunteer for that. I might learn quite a bit. So we've all got an innate understanding here of that bounce back ability and some of those underpinning things. And I'll share our LHH model. And one thing I will share on this chat this afternoon is, as a takeaway, is a little questionnaire, a little diagnostic there. You can get around the 5 stars, the 5 elements, which looks like a star. So if we were to define resilience, there's a lot said here. Actually, I'm going to bring all this up. That reminds me of my time in the Navy, actually. Recovery, it was called. So you had to go along the top of the rope, and then if you fell down, you had to recover and get back. But there was a really important point that all of these are really valid points. Used to work, my old boss, who was an incredibly resilient fellow, actually, I do recall at one point that he had COVID at the beginning. He only had one kidney. He had cancer, and he had a heart condition, and he was 75 and he still works. He's just absolutely made of granite. He's an amazing guy. Worked in the city all his life. I really admire him, and still doing really well, doing great. And he said something to me. He said he'd run businesses for years. He said, yeah, and I was talking to him about resilience. He said, the thing about resilience, which really came up in this chat, he said, it's not just about being well, It's about being able to consistently deliver and then maintain productivity over a period of time. What organizations really want is not that rare flashes of greatness. So brilliant on a Tuesday, but the rest of the week, awful. They want people who are consistently delivering. He went on and said, look, when you interview people, let's be honest, they'll tell you anything that they think you want to hear because they want the job. Of course, that's the game. He said, the best people are those resilient people that you see them 6 months down the line. Yeah, of course, they've made a good start and they're delivering for you. Dead motivated, dead optimistic, cracking on. You see them 3 years down the line. Is the quality still there? 5 years, is it still there? And they pretty much they are maintaining that productivity over a period of time. So there's a lot going on here. But you know, with those setbacks, they can recover, and all this great stuff that you've shared about ability to bounce back. Yes, and if you're really into this stuff, I recommend a book called, by Gonzalez. He's read two, and one of them's called Surviving Survival, and that's about they are quite eye-watering stories about resilience, and people have been through really tough and extreme stories. But there's a nice summary at the back about what it means to be resilient, which I really drew on. And he said it was a defining moment. That thing that happened to them, and some of them are like, oh, really? Was the moment that they became who they became because they used it and they bounced forward. And I hope that sort of resonates with you a little bit. Okay, so here we are in the fourth industrial revolution. You probably, you know, the age of steam, the age of electricity, age of computers, and now the internet of all things, and you know, the morphing between the digital and the human world, and all this good stuff. It really does help, and I don't think we can necessarily anymore be passive about thinking about this. And it ties very much into what I was talking about this morning about mental health awareness as well. That we're going to have stresses. We can't hide from that. So how do we make sure we manage it? Change is, we talked about VUCA and the operating environment that we live in, and adjusting to those inevitable disruptions in life, and not just surviving, but also at times thriving. There are going to be times when we get knocked. We have to live in the real world here, but can we bounce forward despite and keep going in the face of some of this stuff? That's the thinking. Okay, so we've positioned all that. Let's move now onto a resilience model, and our resilience model does draw from a number of different models that I've come across. If you were going to put building blocks now of a model of resilience, and it had to have some features in it, what do you think would make up that model? Which is a slightly different question to, you know, the resilience thing. What do you think would be the sort of headers for you? And that's really boiling it down in terms of, this is my model of resilience, which I'm launching. Something about yourself, yeah, there's absolutely right, Anne. Yeah, that you've got to think about the environment that you're working in and how you're navigating it. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a difficult question, isn't it? But I'm going to build a model of resilience based on everything it said. Support network, Vicky, you're right, that's in there as well. Yeah, but actually you need to have. If I was sort of measuring myself, you think a scale of 1 to 10, what is that like? Life experience and experiences of others. Yeah, and I think that ties into one of them, which is mindset for me. Yeah, mindset. Laura, you could have said it. That's it. Yeah, so there's certain things that thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. Susie, we'll talk about that in a moment. That's tying in very much to that you need to know that, and I'm going to build on that once I've done the model. So there's a few things there about confidence, strength, understanding, emotion, intelligence, support network. Yeah, some of that comes through, I think. Confidence to push yourself when you need to protect yourself. That's nice, Tracy. I like that. I think together we could build a most amazing model here. Let me share this one. Anyway, and from it, asking for support. That again, learning. Andy and Clark, both of those feature in this particular model. Yeah, there's another model. As I say, this is the one that we have. Here we go. Is these star these elements here: mindset, optimism, attitude, and awareness, action orientation. Even if you look at some of the writers, they're called Chateau and Rivich. You can look up their book on resilience. Does speak to a lot of elements within this. Ability, they would make sense. They will make sense as we go into them, but you can see some of that immediately. Resourcefulness, you mentioned that, and of course, in the rounds, us, self, well-being, exercise, nutrition, recovery, us as the machine here in terms of what's going on. So these are the elements. I'm going to chip through these now, and the document I'm going to share with you has got these, and you can look at some of the key underpinning parts of that. There's quite a lot of detail in that, so that'll be your takeaway for this session today. So okay, let's get into it, and let's have a look at this resilience model in. Which of those for you do you think is, when I say the word here, which of these resonates the most? Which do you think is really for you the most important one for you? Mindset, action orientation, having skills, and don't worry, I will circle back to some of these. I agree. Mindset for me is everything. Action orientation, mindset. Action. It's funny, isn't it? Because you've got to get your head straight and say, right, okay, I know I've got to do something about this. What steps am I actually actively going to take? Because you feel so much better when you've done those. And it will speak to different things. There, for me, I think it's really hard because they're all going on at the same time for me. I do think where the mindset is right, the others will naturally fall in. That you'll go, okay, I'm aware of what's going on. I've got the right attitude. What am I going to do about it? Yeah, and Kazi, you put that ability is if I feel stressed, my problem solving skills go out the window. And I might put this here now. Actually, there's a guy called Donaldson, works out of Harley Street, he's a psychotherapist, and I'll cycle back to the point at the end. He says, look, think about that water bear. To a certain degree, we all have a degree of this already. It's just about, I don't know whether you use the watering that garden, nurturing that resilience garden for you. We all have a degree of, we can all solve some problems. We all have some knowledge. We all have, to a certain degree, some friends around us. We have a degree of well-being. It's making sure that these are all sort of tended to and thought about. So we all have it within us to do some of these things. That it's absolutely, you don't have to be superhuman. So I'll make this point, which I will then reiterate at the end. Okay, let's just work through these and let's get again a little bit of interaction here from you. I won't do it for all of those, but I think mindset, dialing up the elements as applied, Anne, I think is a lovely point there. Thank you. Optimism, attitude, and awareness, supporting elements here. If you really wanted to boost your mindset for you, and you really want to get yourself there and really just G yourself up, I use that phrase. What ideas do you have for that? Let's hear. Obviously, I've got some stuff here, and I'm going to go deeper into some of it in a minute. But we want people that the underpinning trio here of mindset or optimism, attitude, and awareness. What thoughts do you have about how you can really, really boost those? And that's like specific actions. This is all very well saying you must have a positive outlook. How do we do that? What do we do? Find things funny. Okay, how? Mindfulness, Rebecca, brilliant. So powerful. Meditation, mindfulness, giving yourself space to really look at things objectively. Visualizing, yeah, it's really good. Looking at the bigger picture, see exercise, learning and knowledge, socialization, and sleep will all underpin these. These will definitely come into the wellness things. Taking time to step back. Yeah, I saw a technique once. They said, with stepping back, draw a line and say, this issue you were to put, and that's your life, this issue, to what extent would this issue, how would you represent it? And say, well, it's a dot here. So if you look at it and step back, celebrate big wins. Affirmations also help people too. Affirmations are great. Scaling back on commitments. I think there's always that's the awareness stuff there as well, isn't it? So there's some cracking stuff coming in. I think setting boundaries is important. I never like to complain about things. Tracy, thank you. Until I've tried to resolve them myself. Yeah. Which one are you going to steal? Paul's. I haven't seen that one yet. Consider the path of possibility rather than the limitation. Paul Neville, fantastic. Big shout out there. It's fantastic. Being kind to yourself, Alicia, comes up quite a bit about forgiveness of yourself. I say, look, just let it go. You know, just be kinder to yourself. And we'll talk about those mindsets in a moment. Some core things here, but okay, reflect on positive outcomes for you personally. And I quite like the idea of, okay, I'm not going to worry about this negative thought now. I'm going to put it in the box. I have found myself doing this. I'm going to worry about it later. Oh, I haven't got time to worry about this now. I'll do it at another time. And, you know, I think that came up about mindset enhancing as well, oxygen. Finding people who make you laugh is always good. I think we all know people that you can pick up the phone and within a few minutes, they've just put everything into perspective because they're laughing at you heartily. Because you go, yeah, it's not that bad, is it really? They go, no, you'll be fine. Now, I've got a little challenge for you. That's why I've highlighted something. Mostly, some of you will be qualified coaches anyway. You'll know reframing. Reframing. Let's have a go at that. Right, I'm going to show you an image. I want you to tell me what first comes into your mind as soon as you see it. Here we go. If you've seen it before, fine. But I always use this because I love it. Okay, bear with me. Bear with me. I'm going to go into reframing in a moment. This is a reframing comment. But what comes into your mind when you see that image? It's funny. Deborah, yeah, lazy. Why? Accident, going around a problem, laziness. Okay, stuff. Yeah. There's some cracking stuff coming in here. This is great. So cool. How could it painted? How they painted around it? Cracking. Not my job to move the branch. So, and this is exactly, and this is always used with coaches to illustrate a point about a reframe. If you look at this image here, the initial reaction is that you had one job. That's always a good one. You had one job, and that was just to get that line straight. But the reframe, and I'll elaborate in a moment, is what is the purpose of the white line? What is the purpose of the white line? And if we are feeling charitable and in a good mood, it's to keep motorists, cyclists safe, motorcyclists and cyclists safe from going off the edge of the navigable tarmac. Now, we don't know what that we have no data as to what that branch is attached to. Perhaps the person doing it had a bad back. But if they haven't done that and drawn the line up to that, and then you're a cyclist in the middle of the night charging along there, or to be honest, even a car, if you were that close, that could cause a problem. Perhaps they were going to come back tomorrow and rectify it. That's a reframe conversation about the same observable facts, but presented in a way, and you've got to be quite careful. If you do that, that's just spin. Again, I've heard that sometimes. That is likely to support resolution efforts. So it's about reframing that causes us to, like this doggy here, look through the window in a different way and appreciate the positive aspects of the situation. I'm going to be honest, when I came across it, I found it one of the most powerful things about what is the reframe here. You heard reframes before, even in lockdown, people were like, I'm locked down. What's the reframe? I'm spending quality time actually with the children that I've not had an opportunity to do for several years due to my work commitments. I'm spending more quality time, doing things around the house and so on that I wasn't able to do before. That it's the same data, but how can we look at it in a different way? I think it's very powerful. It's something we need to think about. So that's mindset. Action orientation always comes into this, that you all resilient individuals take positive steps to sort it out. Not just sitting there going, well, there's nothing that we can do. Okay, well, what are the options to get ourselves moving? To get at, because we all know once we've taken, what was the problem I had the other day? I'm trying to think of it now. I had something where I was stuck in my own mind, and I was like, thought overnight, I thought, right, these are the steps I'm going to take to resolve it. Who moved my cheese? Yeah, tasty. Well, that's a book from the past, isn't it? Yeah, speaks very much to that. Seeking help, generating options, and moving that goal. The model has to have an element of that in it. People are resilient. Take action, even if it was good, wasn't it? It was. I had some of the. I had some of the sort of soft cheeses. Very nice. Action orientation is always gonna come into this at some point. You need to do something about it. I was in the military, and someone said to me once, said, you know, Ed, you can't change a plan if you don't even have a plan. That's true. He said, hope is not a recognized methodology. Resilient individuals go, right, this is my plan. I'll adapt the plan if it's not working, but I'm going to go with this. And if it's not working, then I'll change it a little bit. And this speaks very much to Donaldson's work about you, me, we all have a degree of competence and skills in things we do. We've learned them at school, we've learned at university or college and work, of course, we've picked up loads of skills, and we have the ability to solve some problems, maybe not the complex ones so much, we need to bring in other people. And we know things. So if that is the case, then actually let's identify now what competencies might I need. And that's relevant for me. We were talking the other day about, the changes are coming in the business. What other things do I need to know about? What are the sort of subjects and so on? Okay, well, I'm going to do some research on that so that I'm future ready. Where's the gaps? How do I fill those? There's stuff here about, okay, if I was to write my own fancy LinkedIn profile 2 or 3 years ahead, what would be on there that isn't on there now? What are those courses I would have done and skills I'd have? And learning all the time. We know that this should never be over. That actually, the democratization of learning, the ability to access all sorts of training, should always be there. Those that are most resilient just keep learning and keep gathering information and finding out stuff instead of, well, that's just what I do and that's it. Actually, most of them, they grow as individuals. So ability, I think we get that. We've got to have that as we're all able. Some are more able than others, and we need to make sure that we're always maintaining that ability. Like this one, so I'm going to ask your thoughts on it because it did come out. The resilience model here on supporting elements around resources, and you did put this in. What is key for you here about resources? Most resilient people are resourceful. Thoughts on that to boost your resourcefulness? What sort of things are there for you? Courses and coaching. Yeah, so you're drawing on, and it does speak to the other one, to be honest, anyway. You're drawing on a resource there. So you've got more of a degree of something there. Play to strengths. Yeah, Paul, thank you. Your own and those around you. Yeah. Yeah, counselling, cognitive behavioural therapy, fantastic. So again, resourcefulness there of stuff that you know is available that you can use. Bernadette as well, your network. So often, when I'm talking to my participants, I say, look, please don't end up. Yeah, get comfortable with delegation and using your team. You've got resources around. That's a really good point. I love that as well, Terry. So I was on another point there. Don't become an organizational hermit. Always think about getting to know people because it's quite easy as a remote learner, a remote worker, sorry, just to sit there and go, okay, in my bubble here. But you've got when traditionally in an organizational context, we're all on the same floor. You'd be making friends all the time, getting to know people, getting to know what they're about. You've got to be more proactive with it with a hybrid model or completely working from home. But trusted colleagues, as you say there, Joanne, absolutely fantastic to make sure that there's people around you you can draw on, because inevitably, I would say probably every week I get something, a part of a proposal, I go, hmm, I don't think I've got anything on that. If I didn't have the resources around me, yes, clearly I could go to research stuff around that. But using those people around you to do that, and of course, not just those within your commercial context, but actually the broader personal one about clubs and societies, and all provide incredible resources for you to draw on when you need to. So I always say to people, just don't be that organisational hermit. Maintain and reconnect with existing people in your network, and constantly maintaining that. Resilient individuals are always doing that. Old colleagues and actually very excited today because a former colleague of mine just joined the business, so it was great to see that. And yeah, those people are always there for you, and I think LinkedIn's really great for that, actually, to always think you've got a resource of people that you can just drop a note to and say, look, I've got this going on, any thoughts on it? We worked together a couple of years or whatever, so it's all there for you. It's just remembering that you're not on your own. One of the things when I was talking to this Team GB coach is, she said, a resilience coach, she said, right, I'm going to show you a picture here. And it was a young lady walking up onto the podium to get gold medal. So what I want you to think about actually in resilience is that nobody ever wins a medal on their own. They might stand there and receive it, but what is their support team around them? There's always a support team. And the best have got a great support team there. They give to that individual and you give to them. It's a two-way flow there, but no one ever achieves anything really on their own. And we don't, do we? I don't, and you don't. But we've got our people around us. That means our family, our loved ones, and our friends. They helped you to where you are now often, and they're there for you. Never forget your support team. And who are they, and how can they help you? And how can you help them, I think is a really important point to make as well. The support team. I'll talk a little bit about this at the end. I think one has to be very, very careful about some of this here, because you can sound with resilience as getting very, very preachy, and sometimes that turns people off. And that's not really what you want to do when you're helping people, as coaches, as resilience coaches, and helping other people. But it's absolutely clear that no one's designed to sit down in front of a computer all day. I can't remember how many years it takes off your life. I think it's 7, isn't it? You sit down all day in front of a computer for your whole working life. But you always feel better after some exercise, and even if it's just going for a dog walk or going for a swim, whatever works for you, and that nutrition plays a good part. And there's a great article. You can Google it, the Harvard Business Review article about recovery. This lady on the article, I'm sorry, I can't remember who wrote it now, said, I got an aircraft, and she said, I noticed everyone opens their laptops and starts working again, because some of these aircraft at that time were becoming Wi-Fi enabled. Said, why don't people have a break? Why don't people have a rest? You don't expect elite sportsmen and women don't perform at that level every single day. They go, then they recover. They go, then they recover, and they build up to stuff. Now, the commercial world is slightly different. We get that. But we have to identify when is our rest and recovery time. It's ludicrous to expect people to be on and work, 100%, 365 days. It's ludicrous. And we expect that sometimes of ourselves. And then you sit there of an evening sometimes and go, what am I doing? 7:30. And if you work too late, we all know what it feels like. You turn on the laptop the next day and you're like, I'm just so not up for this now because I'm tired. So recovery is so important, not just from physical exertion, but from just work and having other things. I feel strongly about that because I know it's true. So tips and so on, I'm going to leave that for the time being. What I will do as I'm talking now is I'm going to share that questionnaire, and then for the last 15 minutes, do a little bit more of stuff that I want to talk around, a little bit around mindset and so on. So I'm going to just share that in the chat. If you want to use it, delighted. If you just want to, you don't want the questionnaire, that's fine. So this very gives you more granularity, I think is the word really, to those elements there. So there's lots of little elements you can do, and you can have a look at where you might want to work on yourself, or if you're going to use it with colleagues, great. Delighted if you do. That's what we're all about today. So look, this came up in the chat. It was great to see read this coming through. Resilient, I call it the resilient view, and I always use this image because I love this image so much. It's just beautiful. But the best people here are able to employ accurate and flexible thinking in the way that they approach things. That means they can solve problems, yes, but it definitely came up in the chat. You can see someone else's point of view. You're not threatened by that. You absorb that, and you have the ability to change your own views. There you go. It's just come through. And you can move on. So can we take a resilient view? We would love to, Ed, but there is a problem. There is a problem. We all suffer from this distorted thinking. We don't always make the right meaning of what we see. Why? Because we're all the products of generations way. So we go, we go right back. We go right back into the time, and we see when we were living in caves, we tended to automatically see negativity. So Aaron Beck died, I think, 2 years ago at a ripe old age. Aaron Beck wrote a lot about this. It's called ANT, automatic negative thinking. We're predisposed to it because it used to keep us safe. Because we would look and we go, oh, I think that's a saber-toothed tiger in that hedge there. I think there's a threat coming to me there. We're all pre-programmed to look for threat, look for negativity. That will keep you alive. Look for negativity. And it still goes on. And the problem is we get into this distorted thinking. So it creates this distortion. So we're looking at stuff. And I use this illustration because these three individuals behind Blur, we're not sure. But they're looking at this lady perhaps and making decisions about what's going on. They don't know really, but they may decide certain things. So it's automatic. We've got to disrupt that a little bit, and we're all guilty of it. And I do love doing some of these classic thinking distortions. Come on, give me some of them. Classic thinking distortions. We're on the right track. So can anyone think of any classic ways that our brain distorts things? Maybe I'm not asking the right question here. Classic thinking distortions. If you get it, throw it in there. Hey, Andy, thank you so much. Yeah, generalization, negativity. My day has been diverse, not all the day. Yeah, part of it was. So you overput that. That's fantastic. Oh, this is great stuff. Yeah, so you don't consider the bigger picture. I mentioned that. Lack of self-confidence, criticism, of forgetting the compliments, catastrophizing. I do love that. I love to have a good catastrophize. So you don't consider the bigger picture, and I talked about that. Unconscious bias, absolutely around. Don't feel you're good enough, imposter syndrome, and you just think, okay, as I said, that line, that's just one element here. You don't consider the bigger picture. I should be going to the gym. I must do that. Black and white thinking, no shades of grey. We do this naturally, and it's not always helpful. It's not always helpful, of course, because this tends to lead to poorer outcomes for us. Sometimes, and I have been having sort of doing a number of different facilitating roles over the past few months, and we were talking about some of these. And I think sometimes it's interesting where they said, well, actually, catastrophization, I love to do that because it spurs me to action. I said, that's fine, as long as, the outcome is positive. Paul, thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll get obviously Graham's organising the whole event. I'll see what the method is to get this all out to you. So thank you, Paul, for your interaction. I've really appreciated it. So these all go on a regular basis. And how do we make sure that we sort of disrupt these, and make sure that actually we're getting an outcome? Because sometimes you can use anxiety, and there's a couple of articles out there about that, to engender positive outcomes, because anxiety drives you. But what happens when they're not doing that, and actually it's just getting you into sort of a terrible state? We saw this on the chat already, that this cycle is fairly well known. feeling, thinking, and doing the drivers there. And then if our feeling and our thinking is such that it is in that automatic negative modality, then the flow from that may not be what we want it to be. So we need to get that feeling and thinking right, changing the mindset. One method of doing that is this. And just think of that, okay, you're just about trying out new ways of thinking. So normally there's an activating event. You take a deep breath, you relax, and you step out of yourself and look at that incident objectively. Remember, if we've got this sort of cave, this sort of way back in the day when we lived in caves mindset on things, you've got to look at it objectively because you're always going to go through the Aaron Beck automatic negative thinking. Okay, what are my beliefs and thoughts really in relation to this incident? What do those thoughts mean? Are they true? Am I actually guessing? Are there other, look at the reframe there, interpretations? What is that actually costing me? Notice the correct point I was making there about how that might drive unproductiveness. Well, it's hurting really. Can I try something? And again, it does talk to a reframe there about works better for me actually. Could I look at this in a different way? Check in with yourself, how does that feel? And I make a decision to adopt that. At the end of the day, all that has gone in your head. No one's seeing that. That narrative is internal. Just trying it out, doesn't matter to anyone else. See how that sits. And that's one of those reframe, getting in the positive loop that I've come across the years that I found really, really useful myself. Okay, so we draw our strands together now for this session. Resilience is built in a number of different ways. All of those elements, there's things going on all the time you're doing it. It could be, getting a decent night's sleep, and we'll come on to all those sort of things. It can be about, what more knowledge do I need to succeed in my career? What might be happening in the future? You're going to be pushing at a number of different elements at the same time. There's certain things that go on here that I will reiterate because they're so important. Emotional balance, connection, and possible through that recovery is another point that I will keep going on about. Just unrealistic sometimes to work all the hours that God sends. It's just unrealistic, and it can be learned and improved. Some of you will know about this, that we do love our, I've said already, Aaron Beck's automatic negative thinking. We have to balance that with our gratitude, the gratitude diaries. You can use affirmatory comments to yourself or internally affirmatory comments about, what you're good at and celebrating what you're really, what is your thing. And realistic optimism. Some of you may have come across a phrase, it's the Stockdale paradox. Admiral Stockdale, and I'm quoting him here, was the most senior prisoner of war in Vietnam. He's 7 years he was a prisoner and suffered appalling deprivation. And he was a senior serviceman in that prisoner of war camp in Vietnam. And he reflected on what it meant to be resilient. And one of the things that he noticed was that some individuals said, oh, come Christmas, coming up to Christmas, don't know how that's happened, but we're in November already. Come Christmas, I'm going to be released and going to go home. And Christmas would come and they weren't. They're like, oh, Easter, then we go home. Easter come and they're like, oh. And eventually they just gave up. They literally just gave up and just ebbed away. And he reflected on this and he said, you've got to hold two truths at the same time. Because people say, oh, was it a resilience model? You've got to be optimistic. Yes, you've got to be realistically optimistic. You will prevail in the end if you do a number of different things. But you've got to face the brutal realities of where you are now. Unfounded optimism and a complete lack of reality will not see you through. It's got to be founded in something saying, look, we've got to keep at it. We'll get there in the end, but we've got to confront what we've got to confront right now and do something about it. It works for me. It certainly works for me. You must look for support from others. Think about your Olympic support team. Who are they? Look after them because they look after you, and offer support. Gonzalez talks about adopting the rescuer position. Not too much, but enough that you are helping others. Let me relieve you of that particular burden. I will sort that out at work. They're going to more likely help you with certain tasks as well. So it's always about trying to offer support where you can to other people, giving, and likewise they will want to help you. So I think Most psychotherapists say connection is and they call it the most protective factor in resilience. It is your force field. If nothing else, keep your people around you and they'll look after you. And they'll do their very best to. And I know that to be true. My boss used to say this: look, Ed, you service your car when there's nothing wrong with it at the end of the day. So just absolutely do that. You might feel absolutely fantastic, brilliant, but it's still worth adopting those habits and making sure, well, why do I feel so good? What do I do that makes me feel like that? How can I maintain that keeping going forward? Nothing wrong with thinking about it in that way. And well-being is about all sorts of things, isn't it, for us, really? Feeling well, getting some fresh air and just taking even light exercise or something. We don't have to absolutely thrash ourselves. Sleep has become the new thing. Well, it's always been there, to be honest with you, but it's all about, people used to boast at how little sleep they got. People just pointing at them now saying that's ridiculous, especially if it's forced lack of sleep due to overwork. You can't bank sleep. It has to be the same time to bed, roughly, and the same time up for maximum energy. You can't I do 3 hours a night during the week and then I sleep so many hours. You feel awful normally at the weekends if you do that. Can't get to sleep, caffeine, binned after 2 o'clock because it has a half-life of 7 hours. Normally quite a good tip. But I do like my coffee, I must say. And there's stuff about distraction here, doing stuff that you love, making sure that you've got other things in your life other than work because it drives energy for you. And finding out, trying something new is always recommended, as it takes up some other stuff. So you've got other dimension, because that helps build your resilience package, really. Instead of it's just me and work. Well, that's not very helpful. Being on screens all the time, I don't think is very helpful. It doesn't really point to that. We haven't got time to go through dopamine looping, but you can Google that, and constantly searching and stuff. Endless time on your phones and so on. Why? Because it just spins the brain, and your brain gets very noisy, and that's where meditation comes in. And I think we've already said that a little bit here today as well, about learning to forgive yourself and forgive others. I always find music very, very useful, to be honest with you. I think that's can be a real mood change. Feeling like I'm for this at the moment. So I listen to a couple of songs and it really does help you there. There's lots of little things we can do and adjustments to make sure that we're always thinking about our resilience, and making sure that we've got that sort of building up that protection. And there we are, really, and that's where we come to the end. And I'm reiterating the point because I always thought it was really interesting when I read that we don't have to be Superman or Superwoman to do any of this. They're all quite normal, these things, but we just need to get them to the foremost. We've all got a degree of confidence. We can solve some problems, and we hope we've all got some friends we can talk to. And sometimes we do get unpleasant emotions that we have to try and accept and work through in ourselves. But the social support is so important. And people say, let's meet up. It's always worth thinking about, well, I should go and see them, not hide away at home. And the oxygen mask is a well-used phrase. But thank you, Cozy. There's always that saying, isn't it? When you're sitting there next to your loved one, the oxygen mask falls down on an aircraft because possibly you're losing altitude. Which mask do you put on first? You put yours on because you can't look after anybody. You can't look after your son, your daughter, your wife, your parents, and so on, and your colleagues if you don't even look after yourself and keep yourself on that A game. It's always about care for yourself. You can look after someone else. So that's where we end, and that is on the hour. So there we go. Fantastic. First of all, I want to thank you so much for engaging today. Genuinely, it's been an absolute pleasure to read those really productive comments as well. You're in the field. I know a lot of you have got endless experience here. So thank you so much for coming on and seeing me this afternoon. It's been wonderful. So thank you very much for your time, and obviously look after yourselves as well, and look out for some other stuff as well. So thank you very much for your time. Unbelievably, I've now got another call, so I'm gonna have to go. So thank you so much for your time. But if any questions do come up, put them in through Graham, and maybe I'll come back to you on email because I've got to jump onto another one there. So thank you so much for your time. Cheerio. Bye bye.